Hello there. Stay a while and listen. Tonight, our journey through the world of Greek myths begins with a tale of beauty, desire, and the trials that love demands. Settle in and imagine yourself in a world of gods and mortals, where the boundaries between the two are constantly shifting. We'll begin our journey with Psyche, a woman whose beauty captivated all who saw her, but whose heart longed for something more than admiration from afar. Psyche was born into a world that measured everything by its outer beauty. Imagine the world through her eyes, the soft murmur of admiration, the steady hum of people whispering about her from behind closed doors. She walked through life as a living work of art, admired by all but understood by none. Her beauty, like a fragrance, lingered in the air, leaving those who gazed upon her feeling both blessed and sorrowful. It was a beauty that no mortal could ignore, and yet it was a curse, for it rendered her unreachable. Her family, though proud of her, found themselves burdened by her divine image. Her sisters, living their lives in the comforting embrace of ordinary love, could not help but wonder how it was that Psyche, despite her divine grace, had never felt the warmth of a companion's embrace. Their lives, filled with the soft joys of shared dinners and evening conversations, were worlds apart from the isolation that weighed heavily on Psyche. In the evenings, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the earth, Psyche would wander the gardens, surrounded by the delicate scent of jasmine and roses. Yet, despite the beauty of the flowers that bloomed around her, she could not escape the silence that clung to her heart. The laughter of others, the voices of those who were once captivated by her beauty, had faded into mere echoes. All that remained was the soft rustle of the leaves in the wind, a sound that filled the emptiness of her thoughts. As the world around her grew quiet, Psyche's heart began to grow restless. She found herself questioning what her life meant when no one could truly see her. Her beauty was a gift, yes, but it was also a barrier, a veil between her and those who might truly know her. Can you imagine, for a moment, the feeling of walking through a bustling town, only to find that everyone stops and stares, but no one speaks to you? They admire, they praise, they worship, but they do not know you. They do not see the quiet longing in your eyes, the need for someone to look past the surface and understand the soul beneath. This was the life Psyche led, not a life of joy, but one of quiet isolation. The moments when she would gaze into the still waters of the garden fountains, catching a reflection of her own face, were some of the rare instances when she would truly feel the weight of her beauty. It wasn't a reflection of someone she could love. It was a reminder of what others saw, but not who she was. The reflection was perfect, serene, untouched by time, but inside she felt as though she were fading away, trapped in the image others had of her. Her family, aware of her loneliness, often tried to comfort her, but their words seemed hollow, like a song sung without melody. The words of her father, in particular, were meant to soothe, but they were often the hardest to hear. He would say, "You are more than what they see, my dear. They do not know you. They only know the image of you." Yet, what did that mean when the very image they saw was all they cared about? Psyche's heart longed for something real, something that could cut through the layers of admiration and reach her soul. And so, as days passed into years, Psyche became a figure of myth and legend. Stories of her beauty spread across the land. The townsfolk, as they gathered around their fires, would speak of her with reverence, each telling the tale of the girl who was too beautiful to touch, too perfect to be real. It was a strange sort of immortality, one that trapped her in the stories of others, yet kept her from ever truly living. One day, as the golden light of the setting sun bathed the earth in a soft, warm glow, Psyche stood on the edge of a cliff, looking out over the rolling hills. The wind whispered through her hair, and for a moment it almost felt as though the world itself was embracing her. The sky above her, painted in hues of orange and pink, was the closest thing to peace she had ever known. It was in these moments, when the earth felt so vast and beautiful, that Psyche would wonder what it would be like to live without the weight of being a goddess, to simply exist as a mortal with all the love and flaws that came with it. Psyche's world, as perfect as it seemed to others, was filled with a silent yearning. The birds singing in the distance, the fragrance of the flowers that surrounded her, and the stillness of the evening were all that she had, but none of it could fill the void in her heart. The longing for something more, something real, was a constant companion, whispering to her in the quiet hours of the night. That longing, the kind of longing that can only be filled by something more than admiration. A desire for connection that can't be satisfied by beauty or perfection alone. If you've ever felt like Psyche, you've ever longed for a love that truly sees you, not just your surface, then you understand the weight of her heart. Before we continue, take a moment, dear traveler, and consider this. If you enjoy these stories, allow them to guide you to sleep each night. With every new subscriber, the wizard will bestow upon you a peaceful rest, one filled with beautiful dreams and a soft touch of ancient myths. Perhaps this journey is just beginning, and with it, may you find your own answers. Psyche's world was one of beauty, but it was also one of solitude. Imagine, if you will, the quiet mornings, as the sunlight poured into the rooms of her family's home. The golden beams lit the ornate marble columns, casting shadows across the delicate mosaics of flowers that adorned the floors. Each petal seemed to hold its own secret, its own story, but Psyche felt like a flower that could never bloom fully. She was a beautiful presence, yes, but surrounded by silence and expectations she could never escape. Her life was a steady rhythm of rituals. Every day, as the sun rose over the horizon, casting an amber glow across the land, she would walk through the gardens. The scent of roses, jasmine, and lavender would fill the air, as if the very earth was paying homage to her beauty. But with each step she took, the beauty that surrounded her only emphasized her isolation. The birds would chirp, and the wind would whisper, but no one came close. Can you feel the air, thick with scent and silence? The world seemed to hum with life, yet Psyche stood apart from it all, like a statue frozen in time. Her beauty was her prison. The whispers from the people around her were not of love or friendship, but of awe and fear. They admired her, they praised her, but none of them saw her, not truly. At the evening feast, her family would sit around the table, their voices low as they ate. Psyche, though surrounded by the warmth of her home, sat with a quiet emptiness in her chest. Her sisters, who had found their own paths in life, would speak of their husbands, of children they hoped to have, and of the joys of mortal existence. Their lives were filled with love, with the messiness of human connections that were alien to Psyche. They would try to comfort her, as best as they could, offering her words of solace. But the reality was clear. Psyche was not like them. Her beauty had been both a blessing and a curse. Her sisters could laugh and argue, hold hands with their husbands and children, live the normal life that mortals did. But Psyche's beauty stood like a wall between her and the world. She would wander the house at night, the soft flicker of candlelight casting long shadows, and wonder if anyone would ever look at her and see more than a goddess trapped in a mortal form. As the seasons changed, so did the world around her, but her position remained the same. The flowers bloomed, the leaves turned gold and red in autumn, and the snow dusted the earth in winter. Yet, despite the shifting beauty of the natural world, Psyche remained stuck in the same cycle. Her beauty, ever present, always drew attention, but not love. Not the kind of love she longed for the kind of love that saw her as more than just an image, a love that saw her for who she truly was. Can you feel the air, thick with scent and silence? The world seemed to hum with life. Yet Psyche stood apart from it all, like a statue frozen in time. Her beauty was her prison. The whispers from the people around her were not of love or friendship, but of awe and fear. They admired her, they praised her, but none of them saw her. At the evening feast, her family would sit around the table, their voices low as they ate. Psyche, though surrounded by the warmth of her home, sat with a quiet emptiness in her chest. Her sisters, who had found their own paths in life, would speak of their husbands, of children they hoped to have, and of the joys of mortal existence. Their lives were filled with love, with the messiness of human connections that were alien to Psyche. They would try to comfort her as best as they could, offering her words of solace, but the reality was clear. Psyche was not like them. Her beauty had been both a blessing and a curse. Her sisters could laugh and argue, hold hands with their husbands and children, live the normal life that mortals did. But Psyche's beauty stood like a wall between her and the world. She would wander the house at night, the soft flicker of candlelight casting long shadows, and wonder if anyone would ever look at her and see more than a goddess trapped in a mortal form. As the seasons changed, so did the world around her, but her position remained the same. The flowers bloomed, the leaves turned gold and red in autumn, and the snow dusted the earth in winter. Yet, despite the shifting beauty of the natural world, Psyche remained stuck in the same cycle. Her beauty, ever present, always drew attention, but not love. Not the kind of love she longed for, the kind of love that saw her as more than just an image. A love that saw her for who she truly was. Have you ever felt like you were surrounded by beauty, but unable to touch it? Psyche felt this every day. Her life, though gilded in gold and filled with soft scents, was one of quiet longing. At times, she would sit by the fountain, watching the water trickle over the smooth stones. Its constant flow, a reminder that everything changes except her. The water never stopped moving. It could change its course, reshape the path it followed, but Psyche remained still. She could not change. Her beauty had made her untouchable, like the water's surface calm, smooth and unreachable. The townspeople, though they adored her, had created a life for themselves that was separate from hers. They lived in the chaos of love, in the messy struggles of family and home, while Psyche watched from the outside. She saw children running through the streets, laughing as their mothers called them inside for supper. She saw lovers walking hand in hand, their gazes full of affection, as they whispered secrets only they knew. And she felt something stir within her, a deep ache, a yearning for the kind of connection they had. But no one would approach her, for fear of what they might lose in doing so. Psyche's beauty was a barrier. It was an ethereal thing that made others worship her. Yes, but it also kept them away. She was adored from a distance, but no one dared to walk through the garden with her, to sit beside her as a friend, to share a meal as equals. She was the golden statue in the town square, admired but untouchable. As days turned to weeks, and weeks into years, the quiet sadness that Psyche carried began to weigh heavier on her heart. She no longer sought the approval of others. She had long since resigned herself to the fact that she would never be seen for who she truly was. She was not a goddess, not a divine being who could walk among mortals without consequence. She was a girl, a woman, trapped in a body that people worshipped but did not understand. Her family tried to comfort her in their own ways. Her father, full of love and worry, would often sit with her at night, speaking softly of the gods and their plans for mortals. He told her that beauty was a gift. Yes, but it was also a burden. It was a gift because it made others see you as special, but it was a burden because it kept you from truly connecting with those who could love you in return. Does that sound familiar? Have you ever felt like your heart was full of love, but there was no one there to share it with? Have you ever wondered why something so simple, like human connection, feels so out of reach? For Psyche, this was her reality. She had everything the world could offer, except for the one thing her soul craved, the warmth of someone who saw her, not her beauty, but her heart. One evening, as the last rays of the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting a soft pink hue across the sky, Psyche stood alone in the garden. The cool breeze lifted her hair, and the scent of the earth, fresh after a light rain, filled her lungs. For a brief moment, she felt a sense of peace, as if the earth itself were whispering to her that all would be well. But in her heart, a small voice whispered something different. It asked the question that had lingered for so long. Why can no one see me for who I truly am? The seasons continued to change. The flowers bloomed and withered, the leaves changed color, and the snow began to fall. But Psyche's life, untouched by time, remained the same. A silent figure among the beauty of the earth, waiting for someone to see her, truly see her, for the person she was inside. Little did she know, the winds of change were about to blow in a way she could never have expected. And with that thought, I invite you to take a deep breath. If you've ever felt like Psyche, lost in the sea of expectations, and longing for something deeper, perhaps you to understand the struggle of being seen for who you truly are. It is a universal longing, a desire for connection that transcends beauty, status, or expectations. If this story resonates with you, and if you find comfort in these tales of love and self-discovery, consider subscribing. The wizard blesses those who listen, and you will drift into a peaceful sleep with each new story, like a warm embrace in the quiet hours of the night. Psyche's beauty was not just a feature, it was a force, a gentle, unspoken presence that rippled through the world, drawing attention wherever she went. Yet despite the admiration of all who gazed upon her, there was an overwhelming weight that accompanied it, a weight that pressed upon her heart and made every breath feel as if it were taken in the shadow of a dream. Her beauty was the canvas on which others painted their desires, but it was never her own. It was a treasure that others claimed as theirs, a story they told, but never one she had written. Every day, as the first rays of sunlight stretched across the horizon, bathing the world in gold, Psyche would wake to the same reflection in the mirror. The same perfect face, the same smooth skin, and the same quiet eyes staring back at her. She would brush her hair, smooth it over her shoulders, and step into the garden, where the air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers. The world was alive with color, the roses, the jasmine, the lavender-rich flower dancing in the light, and yet, as she walked among them, she felt as if she were a shadow drifting through a world that belonged to others. The sound of birdsong filled the air, a chorus of melodies that seemed to beckon, but never to call her. The breeze whispered her name, but it was only a fleeting touch. The world, with all its vibrancy, seemed to hold its breath when she passed by, waiting for something to break the silence. But nothing did. The admiration she received was quiet, reverent, even fearful. It was as though she had become an object to be admired, but never truly known. In the evenings, as the sun began to set and the sky turned to a deep shade of violet, Psyche would sit alone in her room, gazing out of the window. The light would catch her face in soft hues, and for a moment she would appear like a goddess bathed in the final rays of daylight. But even in this serene, peaceful moment, her heart felt hollow. Her family, sitting together in the warmth of the evening, would speak of things that mattered, of love, of laughter, of the lives they were building together, but Psyche could not join them. She was too distant, too isolated in her own world of beauty and silence. Her father, with his deep love for her, would often look at her with eyes full of concern. "Psyche," he would say gently, his voice filled with the softness of a parent's love, "you are more than just your beauty. Do not let the world define you by what they see on the outside. There is a life beyond this." Yet, despite his words, Psyche felt as though she were drowning in the very beauty that had been bestowed upon her. She had become a reflection, a projection of others' desires. Her beauty was a blessing and a curse. It was a gift that she could never truly claim for herself, for it belonged to everyone but her. As we step away from the quiet hum of Psyche's everyday life, we begin to approach the inevitable clash between the mortal and the divine. The gods, those unseen forces that shaped the lives of mortals, were watching her from Olympus, observing her from a distance. Though they saw her beauty, they could not see her pain. They could not see the loneliness that dwelt deep within her heart, a sorrow far more powerful than her outer radiance. It was, perhaps, because of this very beauty, this perfect, unattainable beauty, that Psyche's life began to take a darker turn. The gods themselves had grown restless, and in their restlessness the seeds of fate were sown. The goddess Aphrodite, whose beauty was said to rival that of any mortal or god, could not stand the rising whispers of Psyche's perfection. The mortals had begun to call Psyche the new goddess of beauty, whispering her name with the same reverence they had once reserved for Aphrodite herself. To Aphrodite, this was an affront, a threat to her very essence, for, in the pantheon of gods, beauty was more than just an aesthetic. It was a symbol of power, of control, and Aphrodite was the undisputed ruler of that domain. Her jealousy, a quiet but burning force, festered as the days passed. The worshippers, once devoted to her, began turning their eyes to Psyche. And that, in Aphrodite's eyes, was unforgivable. The goddess of love, beauty, and desire could not allow a mere mortal to eclipse her in the hearts of the people. In the shadow of this divine rivalry, Psyche, as she wandered the earth, still unaware of the turmoil she had caused, would find herself drawn into a destiny far beyond her control. The gods had decided her fate long before she could understand it. One evening, as Psyche stood once again in her garden, lost in the beauty of the twilight sky, a vision appeared before her. It was not the vision of her heart's desire, nor the vision of a love that had yet to come. No, this vision was different. It was not her own mind at work, but the will of the gods, Aphrodite's will. A voice, soft and silken like a whispering wind, echoed in her ears. It was the voice of a god, cold and unyielding. "Psyche, you have disturbed the balance of Olympus. You, who are mortal, cannot claim what is mine. You have stolen the hearts of men and women alike, and in doing so, you have forgotten your place in this world. I shall ensure that you understand who you are, and what you are meant to be." And with that, the winds carried the voice away, leaving Psyche to stand, frozen, as the first tears of her life began to fall. Psyche's beauty, once a gift, had now become a curse. Aphrodite, in her rage, had commanded her son, Eros, to ensure that Psyche fell in love with the most monstrous of creatures, a creature that would forever torment her heart. Eros, however, was no ordinary god. He was the embodiment of love, but his heart was not as cold as Aphrodite's. He was torn between obeying his mother and feeling sympathy for Psyche, who, though she had drawn the attention of mortals, had done no wrong. But the will of the gods was not easily defied, and so Eros set forth to fulfill his mother's wishes, albeit with a heavy heart. As he approached Psyche's chambers, he hesitated. He saw her there, a woman whose beauty was now as tragic as it was divine. He was about to strike with his arrow, to make her fall in love with something that would tear her heart to pieces. But then, something happened. something that neither he nor Aphrodite could have foreseen. As Eros raised his arrow, ready to pierce her heart with the venomous love that would bind her to a monster, his gaze met hers. For the first time in his long life, he was caught. Her eyes deep, uncertain, longing stirred something within him. He paused, his arrow trembling in his hand. It was as if the world itself had come to a halt. In that moment, Eros realized something that would forever change his course. He was not simply a god of love. He, too, was capable of love, and his love, in that instant, was for her. Unable to complete his mother's command, Eros made a split-second decision. He would not harm Psyche. Instead, he would protect her. With a swift movement, he cast a spell that would shield her from the curse of the monster, ensuring that she would be loved by a god, not just any god, but him. Eros took Psyche into his care, not as a punishment, but as a choice. He transported her away from her home, away from her family, to a hidden palace that was invisible to the human eye. This place, though hidden in the mortal realm, was one of divine beauty and peace. It was a place where only Eros could be seen, where he could love her in secret, away from the eyes of the gods. Every night, when Psyche lay asleep, Eros would visit her. He would speak to her, his voice a whisper that danced through the night. His touch was gentle, his presence a comfort that she had never known. But there was a condition. She must never look upon him, for if she did, their love would be broken forever. A divine contract, one that Psyche could not refuse. But despite this protection, the seeds of doubt began to take root within Psyche's heart. Her curiosity, like the tendrils of a creeping vine, began to stretch its fingers toward the unknown. She wondered why Eros, the god of love, would not show himself. Why did he keep his identity hidden from her? The whisper of doubt, once soft, grew louder in her mind. As the days passed in this hidden world, the love she felt for Eros was undeniable. But so was the confusion. How could she love someone she could never truly see? Her heart ached for the answers. But the gods had made their rules clear. She was not to know him fully. And yet, in her solitude, in her longing for clarity, Psyche could no longer silence the whisper of doubt that gnawed at her. She was not satisfied with the love that was hidden in the shadows. She yearned to know the face of the one who had captured her heart. And so, the stage was set for Psyche's most profound test. The choice between trust and doubt, between love and the unknown. It was a decision that would change the course of her life, and the course of Eros's heart for now. Take a moment. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to trust without knowing all the answers? Where love asked you to walk without seeing the path ahead? Sometimes, love isn't about seeing the end of the road. It's about walking it in faith, with a heart full of trust. But as we all know, trust is not always easy. If you find comfort in these ancient tales, where hearts and souls are tested, consider subscribing. The wizard will bless you with peace, bringing you a deep, restful sleep, as you drift into dreams of timeless love and hope. As she wandered through the garden, the scent of the flowers mingling with the earth, Psyche often wondered what it would be like to live without her beauty. What would it be like to walk through the world without being gazed at, without the whispers of admiration following her every step? Would she be free, or would she lose the very thing that defined her? The answer, she realized, was not as simple as it seemed. For without her beauty, who would she be? What would remain of her if the world no longer saw her as a goddess, but as a mere mortal? Her beauty had become her prison. It was a cage made of admiration and reverence, but it was still a cage. The people who saw her, the worshippers who gazed upon her from a distance, never truly knew her. They did not see the loneliness in her eyes, the longing for something real. They did not see the silent ache in her heart that had grown over the years. No, to them, She was just a vision, a fleeting dream they could never touch. Psyche's sisters, though they loved her dearly, could not understand her. They had lives filled with the mundane joys of family. They had husbands, children, and homes that they tended to with love and care. They knew what it was like to be seen for more than just one's appearance. But Psyche could not experience that kind of love. How could she? No one would ever look at her as a woman, a sister, a friend. They only looked at her as the embodiment of beauty, a perfect vision they could never possess. One day, as Psyche walked through the village, she noticed the people's eyes following her, as they always did. They whispered among themselves, and she could hear the words, though none of them were spoken directly to her. "She is the most beautiful woman alive," they would say. "Surely she is a goddess." But their words never reached her. They never touched the core of who she was. They were just the surface of what they saw, nothing more. As she passed the market, a young man caught her eye. He did not look at her as others did. He did not stare or whisper. Instead, he simply smiled, as if he were seeing her for the first time. This moment, so simple, caught her breath. It was a smile of warmth, of familiarity, and it made Psyche's heart stir. For the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was someone who could see beyond her beauty. Someone who could understand the longing in her heart. But even this fleeting connection was not meant to be. The world, it seemed, had other plans for Psyche. As the days passed, her thoughts would often return to that brief moment when she had felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. But that moment, as beautiful as it was, would fade into the quiet hum of her existence. The people of the town, the admirers, the worshippers, they all continued to look at her with awe, but never with the depth of understanding that she craved. Her life, filled with beauty and silence, continued. She would wake each day to the same reflection in the mirror, the same image that she had come to know so well, yet never truly loved. She would walk through the gardens, past the blooming flowers, the fragrant roses, and the whispering trees, but nothing could fill the emptiness she felt inside. Her family, though kind and loving, could not replace the one thing Psyche needed: the warmth of someone who could truly see her, who could look beyond the surface and love her for who she was inside. They would sit with her, talk with her, but the conversation always circled back to her beauty. No matter how hard they tried, they could never understand the burden it placed on her heart. And now, dear traveler, take a moment to reflect on this. The world may see us through many lenses, through our successes, our looks, our accomplishments, but who we truly are is often hidden, waiting for someone to look deeper, to see not just what we present, but the person within. If this resonates with you, if you, too, have ever longed for connection beyond what others see, then you are not alone. Psyche's journey is our journey, one of seeking true understanding, love, and belonging. If you feel the stirrings of this story within you, consider subscribing. The wizard will bless you with the peace of mind to sleep as you drift into the warmth of ancient tales and new beginnings. The tension in Psyche's life grew with each passing day. Her beauty, once a source of admiration and reverence, now cast a shadow over her existence. Despite the love and devotion she longed for, the very thing that should have been her blessing had turned into a curse, and the world she once wandered through so innocently had begun to close in around her. The admiration of mortals had led her to the gods' attention, but instead of finding a place of acceptance, she found herself the object of their jealousy and manipulation. It was not long before the goddess Aphrodite, ruler of beauty, love, and desire, took notice of the mortal girl who dared rival her in grace and charm. It is said that Aphrodite could not bear to see Psyche, a mere mortal, become the new subject of adoration and worship that she herself had once held. Her rage, quiet at first, was soon stirred into a burning fury. Aphrodite, the goddess who had shaped the hearts of mortals and gods alike, could not allow this mortal to overshadow her divine glory. In the quiet recesses of Olympus, beneath the gleaming marble columns and the gentle hum of the gods' laughter, Aphrodite's jealousy fermented, turning into something darker. She could not tolerate being eclipsed by a mortal, no matter how beautiful. Aphrodite knew how to wield her power. Her son, Eros, the god of love, would carry out her will, though it meant using the very force that had been granted to him for creation love itself. The irony of it all. The god of love, whose arrow could unite hearts, was now commanded to divide them, to make Psyche fall in love with the most grotesque of creatures, a creature whose love would be nothing but misery, a love born from torment and pain. Eros, ever obedient to his mother's wishes, prepared to carry out this command, but as he drew near to Psyche, ready to pierce her heart with the arrow that would bind her to a monstrous fate, he hesitated. The sight of her standing there in the garden, bathed in the soft glow of the evening light, with the golden flowers swaying around her like sentinels guarding her beauty, filled him with an unexpected emotion. It wasn't pity, nor was it sympathy. It was something far more complex. Love. Eros, with his heart full of both divine wisdom and youthful folly, saw in Psyche something far beyond what even the gods could comprehend. Her vulnerability, her isolation, and the longing that flickered in her eyes, it was something he had never truly noticed before. Despite the weight of his mother's command, something in Eros shifted. For the first time in his existence, he was caught not by his own arrows, but by the sight of Psyche's pure and earnest soul. In that fateful moment, Eros found himself at a crossroads. The duty he owed to his mother, Aphrodite, conflicted with the tenderness he felt toward Psyche. How could he obey the goddess of love when love itself was what caused his heart to waver? How could he wound this fragile mortal when he understood, perhaps better than anyone, that love, when wielded recklessly, could destroy? And so, Eros made a decision, one that would change the course of his life and Psyche's forever. He would not carry out his mother's curse. Instead, he would protect Psyche. His arrow meant to bind her to a monster would instead carry her away far from the influence of the gods to a place where her heart could heal and where she could live beyond the constraints of her beauty. With a quiet spell, Eros transported Psyche to a palace that was hidden from the mortal world. The palace, though set on earth, was invisible to all except him. It was a realm of divine beauty and serenity, a place where time itself seemed to slow, and where the sun always set in the most breathtaking hues. Psyche entered the palace, overwhelmed by its grandeur. The air seemed to hum with energy, and the walls shimmered with a soft light that reflected her beauty in ways she had never experienced before. Though the palace was resplendent, Psyche was not free of the uncertainty that weighed on her. She did not understand why she was here, nor did she know who had brought her. The mystery of the palace was as overwhelming as the loneliness she had carried with her for so long. Eros, in his wisdom, had not revealed himself to her fully. He came to her only at night, under the cover of darkness, when his true identity could remain a secret. He would speak to her, his voice soft and warm, offering words of comfort and companionship, but he never allowed her to see him. He promised her love, but it came with a condition. She must never gaze upon his true form. She must trust him without question and allow their love to bloom in the quiet shadows of their nightly meetings. At first, Psyche was content with this arrangement. She was deeply enamored by the voice that whispered sweet words of affection, and shared intimate moments with her in the silence of the night. But as the days turned into weeks, the longing to know the truth about him began to gnaw. She could no longer live in this world of mystery. this love without form. Her heart, though full, was filled with confusion. She wanted to know who Eros truly was. It was not long before the doubt that had quietly stirred in Psyche's heart began to rise to the surface. Her curiosity, once a gentle murmur, now became a louder call, urging her to uncover the truth. Why would he hide from her? What was he afraid of? What was the cost of this love that was so carefully protected from the world? Psyche's mind began to race. Was this truly love? Or was it some trick, some divine test that she had unknowingly become a part of? Her confusion grew, and with it, the urge to see the face of the god she had come to love. The decision was made in a moment of longing, a moment of vulnerability. She would light a lamp and look upon him while he slept. In doing so, she could finally rid herself of the uncertainty that clouded her heart. One night, as Eros slept beside her, his presence warm and soothing, Psyche reached for the lamp beside her bed. With trembling hands, she lit it, the soft glow casting shadows across the room. As she gazed upon the sleeping form of Eros, her heart skipped a beat. There, in the dim light, she saw him beautiful beyond belief, with golden hair that shimmered like sunlight and eyes that glowed with the intensity of stars. He was not a monster, he was a god, but he was also, in that moment, hers. Psyche's heart fluttered with joy, but in that joy, she also saw something else. A drop of oil from the lamp fell onto Eros' shoulder, and he awoke with a gasp of surprise. In that instant, the love they shared was broken. Eros' eyes, once filled with warmth and affection, now shimmered with sorrow. Eros recoiled, his face filled with heartbreak and betrayal. "You broke your promise, Psyche," he whispered. "By looking upon me, you have shattered the trust we built. I cannot remain with you now. Love is not something to be seen with the eyes. It is something felt in the heart." And with that, Eros vanished, leaving Psyche in the silence of the room, the lamp still glowing beside her. The palace, once filled with light and love, fell into darkness. Now, dear traveler, take a moment. Psyche's journey, so filled with promise and pain, asks a profound question. How often do we let doubt cloud the very thing we long for most? How often do we seek the truth, only to find that what we seek may not always set us free, but rather lead us to the realization that some things are meant to be trusted without being fully seen? If you feel that deep yearning in your own heart, that call to understand the things you cannot fully grasp, consider subscribing. The wizard will bless you with peaceful dreams, where love is tested and trust is earned. Psyche's life, though still enshrouded in beauty, was beginning to shift in subtle ways. The mornings were no longer filled with the same passive wonder as before. Her world, once so simple and full of the fragrance of blooming flowers, now seemed like a vast and empty expanse, stretching endlessly in front of her. Every step she took in the palace felt like a step further away from her past life, yet closer to something she couldn't define. The warmth of the garden she once roamed now felt like a memory, a golden past that had slowly faded away. The first days in Eros' hidden sanctuary, though filled with divine luxury, had not provided her the peace she had expected. The walls of the palace, though beautiful, seemed to close in on her. The rooms shimmered with opulent beauty, golden tapestries and soft velvet furnishings that spoke of timeless elegance. Yet the silence within them echoed like the spaces between each breath. There were no voices but her own, and the light of the palace seemed to grow dimmer. As the days stretched on, the palace was, in its divine splendor, a prison, not of stone or iron, but of isolation. Every night, as the moon cast its silver light across the sky, Eros would arrive, his footsteps barely a whisper in the still air. His presence was soothing, calming even. as if the earth itself had slowed its movement to make way for him. Yet he remained a shadow, a figure that spoke to her, held her, and loved her without ever fully revealing himself. The mystery of him became as intoxicating as his words, and in his presence, Psyche could almost forget the world. Outside, forget the family, the love she once dreamed of having. But despite all this, something inside Psyche had begun to stir, something she could not silence, no matter how hard she tried. It was the whisper of doubt, the quiet voice that asked questions she did not want to answer. Why must he remain hidden? What does he fear? Is it truly love when I cannot know him completely? At first, the questions were fleeting, just small cracks in the otherwise flawless veneer of their life together. She was content, or so she told herself. The nights were filled with shared laughter and words of comfort. Eros spoke of love, of trust, of a future they would share. He spoke of things that made her heart flutter, things that were so deep, so intimate, that they felt as though they belonged to a realm beyond mortals. But with each passing day, those small cracks began to widen. Psyche's thoughts, once clear and calm, now swirled in confusion. She could feel it in the very air she breathed, the growing tension in her chest. The more she thought of Eros, the more the curiosity gripped her. She needed to know, who was he truly? What was he hiding? What would it feel like to really know him? In the quiet of the night, when she lay alone in her chambers, the silence grew unbearable. The palace, though filled with the sounds of the outside world, the rustling of the wind, the call of distant birds, the soft hum of nature, now felt devoid of life. The only sound that lingered was the beating of her own heart, a rhythmic reminder of the unspoken truth. She was in love, but she was also in the dark. Her dreams, which had once been filled with peace and love, now carried the weight of her unspoken questions. Her subconscious whispered to her in fleeting images, standing before her in his true form, his eyes meeting hers with no secrets between them. What would it be like, she wondered, to gaze upon his face, to see the God she had come to love? One evening, as the pale light of the moon bathed the palace in a soft, ethereal glow, Psyche stood at the window, gazing out at the world beyond. The landscape, stretching endlessly before her, felt like a world she had once known but could never return to. The sky was dotted with stars, their light flickering like tiny sparks of forgotten hopes. The wind whispered through the trees, but she could no longer hear its comforting call. Her mind raced, overwhelmed by the temptation. What harm could there be in seeing him, she thought. What if this was the only way to understand him? What if, by seeing him, I could finally be free of this uncertainty? The more she thought about it, the more the desire grew. Desire, not just to know Eros, but to know the truth. Psyche's heart was filled with a quiet desperation now, the kind that comes from years of longing for something that is just out of reach. And in the stillness of the night, her resolve wavered. The lamp that had once been a simple tool, a means of light, now took on a far more significant meaning. It was the key to unlocking the mystery, to revealing the man, the god, who had captured her heart. With trembling hands, she reached for the lamp, its smooth, bronze surface cool to the touch. Her fingers were hesitant at first, as if the very act of reaching for the lamp would pull her deeper into a world of consequence. But the temptation was too great. She had to know. Eros lay beside her, his golden skin glowing in the soft light of the room. He slept soundly, his chest rising and falling with the rhythmic beat of his heart. Psyche's breath caught in her throat as she leaned over him, the light from the lamp casting long shadows on the walls. The room was still, the quiet pressing against her, urging her to act. She lifted the lamp gently, careful not to make a sound, and as the light flickered in the darkness, her gaze fell upon him. The sight that met her eyes was more beautiful than she could have ever imagined. Eros was radiant, his features sculpted like the gods themselves, his golden hair glowing like the sun's first rays. But it wasn't just his outward beauty that struck her. It was the vulnerability in his expression as he slept, the tenderness in his features, as though he too were caught in the web of their shared love. For a moment, Psyche forgot everything. The world around her faded, and all that existed was the god before her. He was not a monster, as she had feared. He was not some creature of terror. He was a manna divine being. Yes, but still a man who loved her. But then, as if in response to her gaze, a drop of oil from the lamp spilled onto Eros' skin. The warmth of the oil seemed to stir something in him, and his eyes snapped open. His gaze met hers, and in that instant, everything changed. Eros pulled away, his wings unfurling in a graceful arc as he floated back, his eyes wide with shock. The bond that had once seemed unbreakable was now shattered. "Why did you look upon me?" he asked, his voice low and filled with sorrow. "You were not meant to see me, Psyche. Love was never meant to be seen with the eyes. It is felt with the heart." Psyche's heart broke in that moment, the weight of her actions settling heavily upon her. The love that had once been so pure, so full of promise, now felt tainted. "I didn't mean to betray you," she whispered, her voice filled with regret. "I just needed to understand. I needed to know if you were real, if this love was real." Eros' expression softened for a moment, but the damage had been done. "You broke our trust," he said softly, "and now I must leave. I cannot stay with someone who doubts me." And with that, Eros disappeared into the night, his wings vanishing like a shadow into the darkness. The palace, once filled with love and light, was now empty, its beauty hollow and distant. The warmth that had surrounded her was gone, leaving only cold silence in its wake. Now, dear traveller, take a moment to reflect. In the quiet of Psyche's betrayal, there lies a question that we all must face at some point in our lives. How often do we allow doubt to cloud the love we are given? How often do we seek the truth, only to find that the journey to find it causes us to lose the very thing we sought to preserve? If you've ever wondered about the balance between trust and doubt, between love and the need for certainty, you're not alone. The wizard, in his wisdom, will bless you with peaceful rest, bringing you clarity as you sleep, and guiding you toward the path of understanding and forgiveness. Psyche had lived a life of silence, where the voices of others were far away, and the only voice she had truly listened to was the quiet thrum of her own heart. She had learned to live in the shadows of her beauty, where adoration and affection never truly reached her core. She had longed for the warmth of a love that would look past her beauty, to see the real woman beneath. And when Eros, the god of love, entered her life, it seemed as though all her dreams had come true. He had taken her to his hidden palace, where the whispers of the outside world no longer mattered, and the only sound that filled the air was his gentle voice. But the price for this love was a silent one. He asked for her trust. But trust is a fragile thing. It can be easily broken, and once shattered, it is almost impossible to restore. And in that moment, when Psyche decided to break the one rule Eros had given her never to look upon him, she unknowingly shattered the fragile bridge they had built. The temptation was subtle at first, just a small, almost imperceptible tug in her heart. But that tug grew stronger, louder, until it drowned out every other thought in her mind. She had lived in uncertainty long enough. She had walked through the gardens of beauty, of adoration, but never had she felt truly seen. Eros had promised her a love that transcended the superficial, yet the truth of his form remained hidden from her eyes, and though she had trusted him with her heart, her mind could not silence the nagging question: who was he really? As she stood at the window of her chamber, looking out into the starry night, the shadows of doubt began to twist around her. The moonlight bathed the earth in a silver glow, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch across the land, and for a brief moment, the world beyond the palace seemed almost within her reach again. She was no longer a figure cloaked in mystery, but a woman with desires that could not be ignored, no matter how much she wished them to disappear. Now, dear traveler, take a moment to reflect. In the quiet of Psyche's betrayal, there lies a question that we all must face at some point in our lives. How often do we allow doubt to cloud the love we are given? How often do we seek the truth, only to find that the journey to find it causes us to lose the very thing we sought to preserve? If you've ever wondered about the balance between trust and doubt, between love and the need for certainty, you're not alone. The wizard, in his wisdom, will bless you with peaceful rest, bringing you clarity as you sleep, and guiding you toward the path of understanding and forgiveness. Psyche had lived a life of silence, where the voices of others were far away, and the only voice she had truly listened to was the quiet thrum of her own heart. She had learned to live in the shadows of her beauty, where adoration and affection never truly reached her core. She had longed for the warmth of a love that would look past her beauty, to see the real woman beneath. And when Eros, the god of love, entered her life, it seemed as though all her dreams had come true. He had taken her to his hidden palace, where the whispers of the outside world no longer mattered, and the only sound that filled the air was his gentle voice. But the price for this love was a silent one. He asked for her trust. But trust is a fragile thing. It can be easily broken, and once shattered, it is almost impossible to restore. And in that moment, when Psyche decided to break the one rule Eros had given her never to look upon him, she unknowingly shattered the fragile bridge they had built. The temptation was subtle at first, just a small, almost imperceptible tug in her heart. But that tug grew stronger, louder, until it drowned out every other thought in her mind. She had lived in uncertainty long enough. She had walked through the gardens of beauty, of adoration, but never had she felt truly seen. Eros had promised her a love that transcended the superficial, yet the truth of his form remained hidden from her eyes, and though she had trusted him with her heart, her mind could not silence the nagging question: who was he really? As she stood at the window of her chamber, looking out into the starry night, the shadows of doubt began to twist around her. The moonlight bathed the earth in a silver glow, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch across the land, and for a brief moment, the world beyond the palace seemed almost within her reach again. She was no longer a figure cloaked in mystery, but a woman with desires that could not be ignored, no matter how much she wished them to disappear. Eros sat up, his wings fluttering, the soft rustle of their movement filling the room with a quiet, mournful sound. "Why, Psyche?" he asked, his voice low and thick with pain. "Why did you break our trust?" Psyche's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen Eros like this, never seen him so full of sorrow, so distant. The love she had once felt now seemed like a distant memory, a fragile thing that was slipping through her fingers like sand. "I just wanted to understand you," she whispered. "I just needed to see you, to know you." Eros' expression soft, but the damage had been done. "Love does not come from the eyes, Psyche," he said, his voice trembling. "It comes from the heart. You were meant to love me without knowing my face, without needing to see me. You were meant to trust me completely." But now his words trailed off. His eyes filled with a sadness that made her chest ache. "Now I cannot stay with you." In that moment, the lamp became more than just a tool of illumination. It became a symbol of everything Psyche had longed for: truth, knowledge, clarity. But it was also a symbol of the danger of seeking too much. of wanting to know things that were meant to remain hidden. The lamp's light had exposed not just Eros' true form, but the fragility of their bond, and with that exposure came the unraveling of the trust they had shared. In that brief instant, Psyche realized that love, the kind she had longed for, was not something to be dissected, not something to be understood through knowledge alone. Love was something to be felt, something to be believed in without needing to see all the answers. And in her quest to understand, she had destroyed the very thing she had sought. Eros' wings beat softly as he rose into the air, his figure vanishing into the night, leaving Psyche in the stillness of the room. The once glowing palace now seemed cold and empty, its beauty no longer a comfort but a reminder of what she had lost. The silence of the room pressed in on her, and for the first time since her arrival, she felt truly alone. The warmth of his presence, the love that had filled the space between them, was gone. The palace, once filled with the sound of their laughter and whispered words of affection, now stood as a monument to her failure. The walls seemed to close in around her, as if the very fabric of her world had crumbled beneath her feet. Now, take a moment to reflect. Psyche's story is one of longing, of seeking what we cannot always have, and of the painful consequences of doubt and broken trust. How often do we find ourselves searching for something more, something beyond the surface only, to realize that the search itself can change everything? Sometimes the answers we seek are not meant to be found by the eyes, but by the heart. If you, too, have ever faced a moment of doubt, a moment when trust was broken, know that you are not alone. The wizard blesses those who journey with these ancient tales, and through them may you find rest and peace. In the wake of Eros' departure, Psyche was left to grapple with the consequences of her actions. Her world, once bright with the glow of love, now seemed steeped in shadows. But this story, like many others from the ancient world, is not simply about a mortal woman and her love for a god. It is a story about the intersection of divine will and human fate, about the invisible forces that shape our lives and the trials we must endure to truly understand ourselves and the world around us. The gods, in their otherworldly wisdom, have always held power over mortals, weaving the fates of individuals like threads in a grand tapestry. Yet, as we explore Psyche's story, we see that the gods themselves are not beyond flaw or sorrow. They, too, are caught in the same webs of love, loss, and longing that we experience. The gods of Olympus, Aphrodite, Eros, and others are not just symbols of power, but also reflections of human desires and struggles. Psyche's trials are symbolic of the journey every mortal must take in their quest for love, meaning, and self-understanding. Her story, though fantastical and filled with divine intervention, mirrors the trials that shape each of us in our own lives. The gods may dictate the paths we walk, but it is the choices we make that ultimately define our journey. After her betrayal, when Eros withdrew from her life, Psyche was left to face the consequences alone. But the story does not end in despair. Psyche's journey takes on an even more mysterious turn, when she is called to undergo a series of trials, tasks that she must complete in order to regain Eros' love and her rightful place in the divine order. These trials, handed down by the gods, are not only tests of strength or they are tests of character, of heart, and of spirit. Each trial represents a deeper challenge, one that forces Psyche to confront her own inner weaknesses and desires. The first of these trials is perhaps the most symbolic, sorting a massive heap of mixed grains, barley, and poppy seeds before sunset. To the mortal mind, this task may seem simple, but to Psyche, it is the embodiment of the impossible. How could one woman, alone, and in a place of isolation, accomplish such a seemingly endless task? But this is where the mystery of the gods comes into play. As Psyche sits, overwhelmed by the task before her, a group of ants appear, seemingly insignificant creatures, but creatures with a profound gift of unity and purpose. They help her sort the grains, demonstrating that even the smallest of beings, when united, can accomplish the impossible. This is a lesson in humility, in acknowledging that no one is truly alone. Even when we face seemingly insurmountable odds, there are forces at work, seen and unseen, that offer assistance in ways we may not fully understand. The ants are a metaphor for the unexpected help we may receive when we least expect it, showing us that divine intervention often comes from the most humble sources. The second trial is one of great danger. Psyche must retrieve a golden fleece from a wild, fire-breathing ram. The fleece is not simply a precious material, but a symbol of purity and transformation. Psyche, now tested in her resourcefulness, is guided by the river god to seek advice from the reeds. The reeds, speaking with the wisdom of the ages, instruct her on how to wait for the ram to pass and how to collect the fleece without harm. This trial speaks to the importance of patience and the understanding that, in many situations, rushing in with reckless haste can lead to disaster. The golden fleece represents the rewards that await those who can act with wisdom and timing, who understand when to step forward and when to wait. Through this second trial, Psyche learns that her approach to love, to life, and to challenges must evolve. What she needs is not only the strength to act, but the wisdom to recognize when to act and when to simply be still. This trial reminds us all of the power of patience in the pursuit of goals, the slow, deliberate work of transformation that often yields the most profound results. The third trial is perhaps the most harrowing of all. Psyche must venture into the underworld itself, to the realm of the dead, to retrieve a box of beauty from Persephone, the queen of the underworld. This trial is symbolic of the deep, often painful journey into the unconscious, into the realms of shadow where truths are hidden and healing can only occur through confrontation with the self. To undertake this journey, Psyche must descend into the underworld, confronting the darkness that exists not only in the world around her but within herself. She is given a task to retrieve the box, but she is also warned not to open it. Yet, the temptation to open the box, to look into the unknown, becomes too great, and in doing so, she unleashes a deep sleep upon herself, one that mirrors the slumber of Eros, who, in his own despair, lies asleep in a place of mourning. The symbolism of the box is rich with meaning. It represents both the promise and the danger of self-discovery, the temptation to uncover truths we are not yet ready to face. The box, when opened, reveals a deep sleep that is not just physical, but spiritual. It is a sleep of the soul, a moment when Psyche must confront the consequences of her own choices. After enduring these trials, Psyche, in her despair, reaches the peak of her journey. But just as the gods have led her down the path of suffering and challenge, they now offer her the chance for redemption. The final trial is not just one of physical endurance, but of deep spiritual transformation. In the depths of her trials, Psyche is transformed. She gains wisdom, not from her victories, but from her failures. She learns that love is not something to be possessed, but something to be earned. It is not given freely, nor is it ever truly free from challenge. It is a love that must be nurtured, tested, and, above all, understood. Only when Psyche completes her trials, when she embraces her own flaws, her doubts, and her humanities, she granted the chance to be reunited with Eros. In this moment of reunion, the gods, seeing the depth of her transformation, finally grant her divine immortality. She is no longer merely a mortal woman who was loved by a god. She is a goddess herself, elevated not by her beauty, but by her strength, her endurance, and her understanding of love's true nature. The trials of Psyche are not just personal challenges, they are reflective of the human condition itself. These trials mirror the cultural beliefs of the ancient Greeks, who saw life as a constant struggle to balance the divine and mortal within us. The gods, though powerful and seemingly omniscient, were still subject to their own passions, just as humans are. The trials, then, serve as a metaphor for the necessary hardships that shape the soul and ultimately lead to the understanding that love, in all its forms, is not something that can be easily obtained. It is something that must be earned, tested, and transformed through struggle. Psyche's transformation also parallels the journey that many ancient myths explored, the metamorphosis of a mortal into a divine being. It is a rite of passage, an allegory for the transition from ignorance to wisdom, from innocence to experience. The Greeks, like many ancient cultures, believed that only through suffering could one attain wisdom, and only through wisdom could one truly understand love. Now, take a moment, dear Psyche's trials are a reminder that the path to true love is rarely smooth. The struggles she faces reflect the very essence of the human experience, the ongoing dance between trust and doubt, between desire and restraint, between love and understanding. We, too, must face our own trials, and it is through these challenges that we come to know who we truly are and what we are capable of. As you journey through these ancient stories, consider subscribing. The wizard will bless you with peaceful slumbers, guiding you into restful nights filled with dreams of transformation and divine understanding. The ancient Greeks viewed their gods as both omnipotent and deeply flawed. They were beings of immense power, capable of creating and destroying entire worlds. Yet they were also susceptible to the same emotions and impulses as the mortals they ruled over. This paradox is central to the myth of Psyche trials, reflect the complex relationship between gods and humans, a relationship marked by both reverence and rebellion. The gods did not offer their gifts freely. For the ancient Greeks, the divine world was one of constant exchange and struggle, where mortals had to earn their place through trial, sacrifice, and the kind of personal transformation that Psyche underwent. In the realm of the gods, even the most powerful beings could fall victim to jealousy, pride, and anger, emotions that are often the catalysts for mortal trials. Psyche's trials, though set in the context of a fantastical myth, reflect deeply human struggles. In many ways, her journey mirrors the common experiences of mortals, who must navigate the complexities of love, identity, and destiny. The gods, despite their power, were often portrayed as meddling in mortal affairs, each one imposing their own desires and whims on human lives. In this sense, Psyche's story can be seen as a reflection of the ancient belief that the divine and the mortal realms were not separate, but intertwined in a delicate dance. The trials themselves, each one increasingly difficult, can be seen as symbolic representations of the stages one must pass through in life's journey of self-discovery and growth. They were never meant to be conquered easily. The gods did not seek simple submission, but rather a demonstration of endurance, intellect, and moral fortitude. Psyche's success in each trial is not just about completing the tasks, but about what she learns about herself in the process. Through each trial, she discovers new strengths, new facets of her character that had been hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be revealed. The first trial, which involves sorting a massive heap of mixed grains before sunset, speaks to a theme of overwhelming tasks, ones that seem impossible at first glance. It may seem like a menial chore sorting grains, but its symbolism is rich and layered. This task, which seems so simple and yet so arduous, is a reflection of the mundane yet essential tasks that make up the fabric of life. Psyche is tasked with doing something that is often invisible, overlooked, and undervalued by society, while necessary, is rarely celebrated. In the mythology of the Greeks, small acts of labor are not merely tasks to be completed, but acts of devotion and purpose. Psyche, in her hopelessness, is aided by the Einsteiny creatures that, in their collective effort, help her achieve what she could not do alone. The ants, though small and often disregarded, symbolize the strength found in unity, community, and the quiet power of those often overlooked by society. This lesson of humble collaboration resonates with a core Greek value, that greatness can be found not only in grand, heroic acts, but in the simple, often overlooked actions that form the foundation of life. This trial teaches Psyche through her, all of us, that no task is too small to carry meaning. Sometimes we must rely on unexpected help to achieve the impossible, and sometimes the key to success lies in unity, patience, and humility. The gods are watching not only for success, but for the spirit in which a task is approached. The ants are not just helping, they are teaching Psyche a lesson about cooperation, humility, and the quiet power that arises when we allow others to help. In the second trial, Psyche is tasked with obtaining the golden fleece of a wild ram, a creature so fierce that its mere presence instills fear in all who encounter it. This trial, unlike the first, requires not just physical labor, but strategic thinking and restraint. Psyche cannot simply overpower the ram. Instead, she must wait for the right moment, listening to the guidance of the river god, who instructs her to gather the fleece from the branches of the trees where it hangs. The golden fleece, glittering and unreachable, is a symbol of purity, transformation, and unattainable beauty. This trial is about understanding the wisdom of restraint, knowing when to act and when to stand back. The river god's advice speaks to the value of patience, a trait that many of the gods themselves struggled to embody. The ram, wild and untamed, represents the forceful, unpredictable nature of life. The golden fleece, meanwhile, represents the reward that comes when we learn to temper our desires with wisdom and patience. It is not the force of will that conquers the ram, but the ability to wait for the right moment, the right opportunity. For Psyche, this trial represents her growing understanding of love not as something that can be grabbed or forced, but as something that must be nurtured, waited for, and handled with care. It also speaks to the cyclical nature of life itself, where everything must be allowed to unfold in its own time. The third trial, where Psyche is sent to the underworld to retrieve the box of beauty from Persephone, is perhaps the most symbolically profound. The underworld is not just a physical realm, but a metaphor for the unconscious, the place where the deepest fears, desires, and unresolved conflicts reside. Psyche's journey to the underworld is a journey into the depths of her own soul, where she must confront the shadows that have haunted her and face the darkest corners of her own psyche. Persephone, the queen of the underworld, is a powerful figure in Greek mythology, representing both death and rebirth. Her role in the myth suggests that beauty, like life itself, is not a static thing. It is transforming through death and rebirth. When Psyche opens the box of beauty, she is not just seeking a physical treasure, but the knowledge that comes from confronting the unknown. The beauty within the box represents a deeper understanding of herself and the world. But in opening the box, Psyche unleashes a deep sleep upon herself, a symbolic moment of spiritual collapse. This act reflects the way in which we often fall into our own darkness, our own sleep, when we seek to possess things we are not ready for. It is only when we have truly come to terms with our deepest fears and desires that we can awaken to the full reality of who we are. Through these trials, Psyche learns not only how to conquer external obstacles, but also how to navigate the inner landscape of the self. The gods, in their wisdom, have created these trials to push her to the limits of her understanding, to show her that love is not merely an emotion, but a journey of transformation. Each trial strips away a layer of her old self, preparing her for the eventual reunion with Eros, a reunion that will not be based on beauty or superficial attraction, but on a deep, mutual understanding and respect. In the end, the trials are a form of spiritual alchemy, transforming Psyche from a mortal woman into a goddess. The gods, having seen the depth of her transformation, grant her immortality, not because of her beauty, but because of her wisdom, endurance, and the purity of her love. This is the final, ultimate lesson of her journey. Love is not something to be possessed or grasped. It is something that must be earned through sacrifice, patience, and an unwavering belief in its transformative power. Psyche's trials resonate deeply within the context of Greek mythology. The ancient Greeks understood that true wisdom and love could only be attained through struggle, self-awareness, and transformation. Her story embodies the essence of the human experience, the relentless pursuit of truth, the challenges we face in our search for meaning, and the ultimate reward that comes when we learn to balance desire with wisdom. The Greeks also believed that the gods themselves were not beyond learning and growth. Even the divine could undergo transformation, just as mortals did. Through Psyche's story, we see that even the gods must grapple with love, jealousy, and loss. They too are subject to the forces of change, just as mortals are. In this way, Psyche's journey speaks to the cyclical nature of existence, the way in which all things must eventually transform, not through force or desire, but through acceptance and understanding. Psyche's story is not just a myth, it is a reflection of the journey each of us undertakes in our search for love, meaning, and self-discovery. Each trial represents a facet of the human experience, from the smallest acts of humility to the darkest depths of the soul. As you continue on your own journey, may you remember the lessons of trust, wisdom, and above all, the understanding that love, like life, must be earned and transformed through each trial we face. If this tale resonates with you, consider subscribing. The wizard blesses those who journey with these ancient tales, and as you drift into peaceful sleep, may you find clarity, wisdom, and the strength to face your own trials. Psyche's journey has taken her through realms of darkness and light, through trials that tested not just her strength but the very fabric of her soul. With each trial, she has been stripped of her illusions, her doubts, and her fears, revealing a core of resilience and wisdom that no mortal had ever before possessed. After overcoming the perilous tasks set by the gods, Psyche stands on the precipice of her final trial to ultimate moment of reckoning and redemption. As she completes the final test, the gods, recognizing her strength and transformation, intervene to bring about the reunion she has longed for. But this reunion is not a simple return to what was. It is the culmination of everything Psyche has endured, a love that was once veiled in mystery, now revealed in all its depth. Eros, too, has undergone his own transformation. The god of love, though divine, has learned that love cannot exist in the realm of perfection alone. It is the imperfections, the trials, and the challenges that forge the deepest, most enduring connections. Eros has learned that love requires patience, understanding, and sacrifice. The love that began in secrecy and mystery must now come into the light, not as a fragile, fleeting thing, but as a deep, eternal bond. The reunion of Psyche and Eros is not just a union of two lovers, it is the merging of two worlds. The mortal and divine realms, which had once been so distant, now come together in a moment of profound transformation. Psyche, through her trials, has transcended her mortal limits. She is no longer the innocent, beautiful mortal who had been admired from afar. She is a goddess, forged in the fires of love, sacrifice, and wisdom. In the mortal realm, love was something to be longed for, something fleeting and imperfect. Mortals loved, but they also suffered. Their love was always tempered by doubt, jealousy, and the frailty of their human condition. But in the divine realm, love was not bound by the same limitations. It was pure, eternal, and unchanging. The gods, with their immortality, could love without fear of loss, without the temporal constraints of time. Yet through her journey, Psyche has bridged the gap between these two worlds. She has experienced love in all its complexity, from the passion and desire to the heartache and the eventual triumph. Her trials, though painful, have given her a depth of understanding that even the gods could not fully comprehend. Through her, love has become something more than divine perfection. It has become something that can be understood and embraced by mortals. When Psyche and Eros are finally reunited, their love is no longer simply a myth or a tale of divine intervention. It is the fulfillment of a deeper truth that love, when tested and endured, transcends both mortality and immortality. Their union represents not just the reconciliation of two lovers, but the merging of two worlds. Psyche's ascension into the divine realm is not merely a gift. It is the culmination of her personal transformation. In the ancient Greek worldview, transformation was a theme that permeated both human and divine existence. To the Greeks, gods and mortals were often seen as interchangeable in some ways through trial and suffering. Mortals could elevate themselves to the status of gods, gaining wisdom and understanding that allowed them to transcend the limits of their human condition. Psyche's transformation is a symbol of this process. She has earned her immortality not through her beauty, but through her wisdom, endurance, and the purity of her love. As Psyche ascends to her new divine form, the gods grant her the gift of eternal life and the ability to live among them her union with Eros is celebrated, not just as a reunion of two lovers, but as a triumph of love itself. Psyche's transformation is a powerful reminder that the most profound loves are those that are tested and forged through adversity. Psyche's ascension marks the end of her mortal journey and the beginning of her divine existence. But this transformation is not an escape from the struggles of love and life. Rather, it is an acknowledgement that love, in its truest form, is a journey, one that requires growth, understanding, and a willingness to endure both the highs and lows that life has to offer. As Psyche joins the gods in Olympus, her beauty is no longer just a superficial gift. It has evolved into something deeper. She is no longer just a figure to be admired from afar. She is now a goddess who has experienced love in its purest form and, through her trials, has gained wisdom that only the gods themselves could understand. Her beauty, once a curse, is now a reflection of the transformation she has undergone. It is not the beauty of the body, but of the soul. The beauty that comes from enduring love, sacrifice, and the trials that test the heart. When Psyche and Eros are finally reunited, their love is no longer simply a myth or a tale of divine intervention. It is the fulfillment of a deeper truth that love, when tested and endured, transcends both mortality and immortality. Their union represents not just the reconciliation of two lovers, but the merging of two worlds. Psyche's ascension into the divine realm is not merely a gift. It is the culmination of her personal transformation. In the ancient Greek worldview, transformation was a theme that permeated both human and divine existence. To the Greeks, gods and mortals were often seen as interchangeable in some ways. Through trial and suffering, mortals could elevate, themselves to the status of gods, gaining wisdom and understanding that allowed them to transcend the limits of their human condition. Psyche's transformation is a symbol of this process. She has earned her immortality, not through her beauty, but through her wisdom, endurance, and the purity of her love. As Psyche ascends to her new divine form, the gods grant her the gift of eternal life and the ability to live among them her union with Eros is celebrated, not just as a reunion of two lovers, but as a triumph of love itself. Psyche's transformation is a powerful reminder that the most profound loves are those that are tested and forged through adversity. Psyche's ascension marks the end of her mortal journey and the beginning of her divine existence. But this transformation is not an escape from the struggles of love and life. Rather, it is an acknowledgement that love, in its truest form, is a journey, one that requires growth, understanding, and a willingness to endure both the highs and lows that life has to offer. As Psyche joins the gods in Olympus, her beauty is no longer just a superficial gift. It has evolved into something deeper. She is no longer just a figure to be admired from afar. She is now a goddess who has experienced love in its purest form and, through her trials, has gained wisdom that only the gods themselves could understand. Her beauty, once a curse, is now a reflection of the transformation she has undergone. It is not the beauty of the body but of the soul, the beauty that comes from enduring love, sacrifice, and the trials that test the heart. Psyche's ultimate ascent into divinity is a symbol of the power of love to transcend all barriers, whether they be those of mortality or the boundaries between the gods and humans. Love, in its truest form, is not bound by time or space. It is not defined by beauty or perfection. Rather, love is the force that binds all things together, that gives meaning to life and elevates the human spirit. In the reunion of Psyche and Eros, we see the culmination of a journey that is both personal and universal. Through Psyche's trials, the gods have shown that love is not an easy gift. It is something that must be earned, understood, and nurtured. Psyche has not just gained a place in the divine realm. She has earned the right to experience a love that is eternal, a love that is both mortal and divine. While the gods represent the ideal of love, unchanging and eternal, it is the mortals, the human beings, who show us the true depth of love's power. Mortals love with passion and sacrifice, with fleeting moments of joy and enduring pain. The gods, with their immortality, cannot experience love in the same way. For the gods, love is often a matter of possession or power, an eternal bond that is free from the uncertainties that humans must navigate. However, it is precisely these uncertainties, these challenges, that make human love so profound. The mortals are the ones who must fight for love, who must endure the tests of time and circumstance. And it is through these trials that they learn the true meaning of love. The gods, though powerful, can only look on in awe as mortals like Psyche prove that love, when it is earned and understood, can transcend even the boundaries of life and death. Psyche's ascent to the divine is, therefore, a powerful statement about the nature of love. It is not the flawless, perfect love of the gods that makes love valuable. It is the human struggle, the sacrifices made, and the lessons learned through suffering that give love its true meaning. Psyche's story is more than just a myth. It is a journey of transformation, a reminder that love, in its truest form, requires patience, sacrifice, and the willingness to face even the darkest corners of our souls. We all must face our own trials in life, and it is through these trials that we come to understand the true meaning of love, its power to heal, to transform, and to unite. As you embark on your own journey, may you remember the lessons of Psyche. is not just a gift, but something that must be earned, tested, and transformed. And through each trial, may you find strength, wisdom, and the courage to face the love that awaits you. If you've found solace in this tale, consider subscribing. The wizard will bless you with peaceful slumbers, guiding you through your own trials and into the embrace of love, wisdom, and transformation. Psyche's ascension to divinity is more than just a reward for overcoming the gods' trials. It is the manifestation of the inner transformation that began long before she faced the gods' commands. When Eros first took her into his care, she was a mortal woman, beautiful, but also fragile and uncertain in her understanding of love. Through each trial, Psyche grew not just in wisdom, but in a deeper understanding of herself, her desires, and the true nature of love. Her reunion with Eros does not mark the end of her journey, but the beginning of a new chapter, one where she is no longer bound by the constraints of mortality. She is reborn, not just as a goddess, but as an embodiment of love's potential to transform and transcend. Psyche's journey is not merely a literal one, but a spiritual one through love. She becomes both a lover and a force of nature herself. The gods' intervention, the trials she faced, and the painful lessons learned along the way have prepared her for this ascension, but it is her personal evolution that makes her worthy of it. In a sense, Psyche's ascension mirrors the alchemical process of transformation. She started as a raw, unrefined element. Through her trials, she was forged into something new. This transformation is not just about achieving a higher status, but about realizing her own divinity. The divinity that exists in all of us when we confront our fears, our weaknesses, and ultimately, our capacity for love. The reunion between Psyche and Eros is not a simple return to their previous state. Their love, now forged in the crucible of trials and suffering, is deeper and more profound than before. It is a love that has been tested and refined, one that transcends both the human and the divine realms. Their reunion represents the culmination of all the lessons they both had to learn. Had to understand that love is not just about perfection or beauty, but about the willingness to be vulnerable, to trust, and to give without expectation. Psyche, for her part, had to learn that love cannot be possessed. It is not something to be controlled or understood through mere curiosity, trusted and allowed to grow in its own time. Their union becomes a symbol of the balance between mortal imperfections and divine purity, showing that love, when allowed to evolve naturally, is capable of transcending all barriers. In their final embrace, there is no more mystery, no more unanswered questions. They are no longer two beings separated by fate or duty. They are united by a love that has been earned through hardship and growth. This love is no longer the innocent, idealized passion of the gods, but a love that encompasses understanding, compassion, and mutual respect. The gods, in their intervention and influence over Psyche's life, serve as both mentors and obstacles. They are not mere beings of perfection. They are deeply intertwined with the emotions and experiences that drive humans' jealousy. The Greek gods, despite their immortality, are as much a reflection of human nature as they are of divine power. They experience the same flaws and passions that define the human condition, and this is what makes their involvement in Psyche's life so significant. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, is driven by pride and jealousy. Her anger at Psyche's beauty and the adoration it garnered from mortals leads to a series of trials meant to humble her. Yet Aphrodite, like the other gods, is not immune to her emotions. Her jealousy and fear of being replaced by a mortal reflect the human struggles of insecurity and fear of being forgotten. By contrast, Eros, who is initially caught between duty and desire, grows through his love for Psyche. He learns that love is not about dominance or control, but about trust and connection. Thus, the gods, are not all-knowing or all-powerful in the way that we might expect. They, too, are bound by emotions and limitations, making them both powerful and fallible. Their influence on Psyche's journey is as much about guiding her through her struggles as it is about demonstrating the very nature of love itself. The gods shape Psyche's path, but they also learn from her. Psyche's ascension is not only physical. She is granted immortality, but it is also spiritual. She evolves from a fragile mortal, loved for her beauty, but constrained by her isolation, into a goddess who understands love in all its complexity. Her immortality is not a gift of eternal beauty or grace. It is a gift of wisdom, earned through her trials and her deepened understanding of herself and the world. In many ways, Psyche's story mirrors the philosophical concept of the hero's journey, the archetype that exists in many myths around the world. The hero is called to adventure, faces trials, and emerges transformed. In Psyche's case, her hero's journey is marked not by physical battles, but by internal struggles with doubt, curiosity, self-worth, and the understanding of love. Her ascension, then, is not just an elevation to a divine state, but a recognition of her inner strength and transformation. Her journey reflects the ancient Greek notion of eudaimonia, flourishing of the soul, a state of living in accordance with virtue and wisdom. It is only through enduring the trials of life that Psyche has reached this state of enlightenment, proving that true love is not about perfection or ease, but about personal growth, understanding, and the willingness to confront hardship. Thus, the gods are not all-knowing or all-powerful in the way that we might expect. They, too, are bound by emotions and limitations, making them both powerful and fallible. Their influence on Psyche's journey is as much about guiding her through her struggles as it is about demonstrating the very nature of love itself. For gods shape Psyche's path, but they also learn from her. Psyche's ascension is not only physical. She is granted immortality, but it is also spiritual. She evolves from a fragile mortal, loved for her beauty but constrained by her isolation, into a goddess who understands love in all its complexity. Her immortality is not a gift of eternal beauty or grace. It is a gift of wisdom, earned through her trials and her deepened understanding of herself and the world. In many ways, Psyche's story mirrors the philosophical concept of the hero's journey, the archetype that exists in many myths around the world. The hero is called to adventure, faces trials, and emerges transformed. In Psyche's case, her hero's journey is marked not by physical battles, but by internal struggles with doubt, curiosity, self-worth, and the understanding of love. Her ascension, then, is not just an elevation to a divine state, but a recognition of her inner strength and transformation. Her journey reflects the ancient Greek notion of eudaimonia, flourishing of the soul, a state of living in accordance with virtue and wisdom. It is only through enduring the trials of life that Psyche has reached this state of enlightenment, proving that true love is not about perfection or ease, but about personal growth, understanding, and the willingness to confront hardship. Psyche's ascension to Olympus, joining Eros as an immortal being, highlights the contrast between mortal and divine love. While the gods love eternally and without the constraints of mortality, human love is bound by time, frailty, and imperfection. Mortals must struggle to find love, to hold on to it, and to understand its deeper meaning. It is a pursuit that is filled with heartache and joy in equal measure. The gods, by contrast, do not experience love in the same way. Their love is eternal, unchanging, and often detached from the daily struggles and complexities that mortals face. They are not bound by the limitations of the human condition. Yet, as we see in the myth of Psyche and Eros, even the gods' love can be complicated and imperfect. Their own struggles with jealousy, pride, and desire mirror the challenges that mortals face. The divine realm, though filled with immortality and perfection, still contains the elements of vulnerability and transformation that are inherent in the human experience. Psyche's story bridges these two worlds. Her union with Eros represents the blending of divine and mortal love, one that is both timeless and transformative. Through her, we see that love is not just a divine gift. It is a force that can elevate and transform. Even when faced as Psyche is transformed into a goddess, she is given the title of Psyche, which means soul. In many ways, this is a reflection of her journey. That was not just about love in the romantic sense, but about the spiritual awakening that love brings. Love, in its purest form, is not simply an emotion. It is the force that connects all things, that unites the body and soul. Psyche, now a goddess, embodies this connection. She is the personification of the soul's journey through suffering, transformation, and ultimate enlightenment. Her legacy is one of spiritual awakening. She represents the ability of the soul to evolve and transcend, to move from a state of ignorance to one of understanding, from fragility to strength. Her story reminds us that love, when we approach it with openness and resilience, can lead to profound personal transformation. It is through love that we come to understand who we truly are and the divine potential within us all. Now, dear traveler, take a moment to reflect on the journey you've taken with Psyche. Her story, though ancient, holds timeless lessons. Love, in all its forms, can elevate the soul, but it requires struggle, patience, and, above all, the willingness to transform. Psyche's trials and her eventual ascension remind us that true love is not about perfection or ease. It is about growth, understanding, and the willingness to face the challenges that life presents. As you rest tonight, remember that love, in all its trials and triumphs, is not just a gift, it is a journey. And as you drift into sleep, may you find the strength to face your own trials with the same resilience that Psyche showed in her own. If you've found solace in this tale, consider subscribing. The wizard blesses those who journey with these ancient stories, and as you sleep, may you find the wisdom and peace to face your own path with love and understanding.